Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. I'm Sophia Ignadiu, Marketing and Events Manager here at Sisense, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's joint Butler and Sisense webinar, How to Successfully Evaluate Business Analytics Software. During this webinar, we will discuss the best ways to go about evaluating business analytics software down to the smallest details, taking your business to the next level. We are thrilled to have two experts in the field, Martin Butler, founder of Butler Analytics, and Adam Blau, an account executive here at Sisense. Martin is best known as the founder of Butler Group, Europe's largest indigenous IT analytics firm until its acquisition in 2005. Today he publishes research through Butler Analytics with a focus on business analytics, including business intelligence, machine learning, big data, prescriptive analytics, and AI. Adam has been with Sisense for over a year and comes with 13 years of experience in enterprise sales. And with that, I will hand it over to Adam.
Great. Thank you very much, Sophie. Hi, everybody. Good morning and good afternoon to you. Thank you very much for joining today. And one of the things that I've gained in the about a year over experience I've been with Sisense is that I've spoken with probably a couple hundred companies at different stages of their BI journey, from companies who are exploring what the different tools are, what the different features are, to companies who really discovered a real strong business need or business challenge that they need to solve. And so what I wanted to do today is walk you through along the journey of what customers do when they before they get to a POC. So how do they formulate the business case? How do they bring in different stakeholders? What are some of the best practices that I've seen companies do in order to implement business intelligence and analytics software within their organization? And one of the most critical first steps that a company typically needs to do is understand what the goals and objectives that BI and business intelligence should solve. So the first question I usually like to ask companies when I'm speaking with them to see where they're at in their journey is, what's wrong with the current situation? What would happen if what would be the effect of continuing to do what you're doing? Have you thought about how many users would benefit from this? Is this going to be an entirely internal use case, or are you going to resell this, or would you actually want to define or make a new business venture from it? So these are really important considerations to make, because in a company, regardless if you're a small or medium-sized business to an enterprise, you have a lot of competing interests, a lot of different competing goals that people want to bring. And so it's really important to understand why you need to invest in the change to evaluate, implement, and deploy a new solution. So one of the first things I like to ask companies when I'm speaking with them is, what are the different use cases that you need to look at in order to frame the technical conversation? So some of the things that we typically hear are people who are what we call Excel hell. So I would say, I think I read a survey that 65% of organizations are using Excel for reporting, so I assume many of the attendees are using that. So there are typically four major problems with Excel. The first would be the amount of time it takes to generate Excel reports. Secondly would be data governance, that you have to create different versions of different Excel reports for different users, and the confusion that can cause. The third is all the different Excel sheets that are out there in terms of which ones are being circulated around, and as well as what would be the benefits that you would experience if you didn't have to use Excel and everything would be automated. So that's typically, if we're able to articulate what if those four benefits from Excel would not, well, if you didn't have those Excel problems and you could solve them, is that a value that provides maybe $100, $1,000, $100,000, or $1 million, that then justifies what kind of time and venture and solution that might be appropriate for you. Another use case that we typically hear from, especially with maybe companies who are using a BI solution already, is that it takes too much time. So if you have to create extracts or views or segment the data, or it's a very IT-driven solution, a common challenge that a common challenge that we hear is it takes too long for us to get a report. I have to send it to IT. It might take a day, a week, or even a couple of weeks before we get it, and the report is no longer of value. So if we're able to solve that, then we can then look at what the value would be and how it would impact other people. And lastly, another one is human error. So if we're creating reports, if we're generating issues from it, or there's inconsistencies, is that going to impact the business? So we see that a lot in financial industries, for example, or regulated industries where human error can be a big problem. So these are just some examples of different use cases that you need to be flushed out. These have to be worked out in terms of how it's going to affect different people in the organization, and you're going to need to justify the need internally, because again, everybody's going to have their own initiatives and their own projects. So if you can justify the need, maybe articulate some of the value, which I'll talk about a little bit, that'll help move that forward. And I will just say in my own experience is that without this understanding what this looks like, the provider selection and evaluation will become overwhelming. There are so many BI tools on the market right now that all say they do the same thing. And it becomes really hard as the client or purchaser to understand which is the right tool. So this helps you narrow down the funnel to understand what is the right company to work with. The second stage is more to define what specifically needs to change. So I mapped out some different use cases, but in your own organization, it might be more specific in terms of what needs to happen. So some of the things that we've learned is that we hear a lot, we need better looking visualizations. I would encourage you to be more specific in terms of be more specific in terms of what the problem is and what needs to be fixed. Typically, it could be working with different data sets, or making users more engaged with reports, or we need to get better insights. And sometimes people think better visualizations will do that, but visualizations tend to be the commodity of the industry. So let's look about, I would encourage you to look at the different stages that you have in order to get to the visualization layer. Like, do we have to work with different data sets, or are we just working with Excel or exports from different groups, or is it coming from an ERP system? And then understand where it's breaking, so that way we can look at it. And then once you put together that map and process, you can see who will be impacted. Is this going to be a big benefit for the IT team, that they're going to have significantly less resources required in order to put together reports? So then maybe we should look at some of the IT team resources to be a part of the evaluation, or is this for financial reporting that we need to get the analysts involved so they can see on a more real-time basis? So this will help you understand the different people, the different parts of your process as you deploy software within the group, because rarely is BI limited just to one person. And if that is the case, then of course you can download software, you can buy it very easily, but as a more enterprise solution, this is a very important consideration. And lastly, once you're able to understand that, really important consideration is to understand what are the benefits, what will the benefits be. Speed to insight is typically something that we want companies come to us that they want to improve upon. They want to be able to have ad hoc analysis. So instead of having to put canned reports together, they want to allow business analysts to drill down, filter, get the insights that they want without having to ask anybody for it. And they want to be able to do that in real time and not having to wait a day or a week. Sometimes they want to embed the analytics. So if it's for a sales team, they want to have dashboards in Salesforce, for example, or it needs to be part of an application. What would that mean in terms of your company? Will that help you increase revenues? Will that allow you to have better customer service? These are really key considerations that C-level executives look at when deciding to make a purchase, when they look at what this will do. And so if you can integrate multiple data sources and have all these different types of insights in a holistic level, then you're able to articulate what the business benefit will be, and it will help you really flush out the requirements and get the project moving to the next stage by grabbing other stakeholders who will be working with you in terms of getting this rolled out. And I wanted to mention this is because in our experience, all account executives here at Sisense, we've really, in speaking with all these hundreds of different companies over the year, we found that if this part hasn't been flushed out, it's very likely the project won't move forward. I read a statistic recently from CEB stating that it might take you individually or as a group, let's say we make up a number, 200 days to make a decision on BI. It might also take you 200 days to not make a decision. So this is really the legwork that needs to happen in order for you to justify the evaluation, the time that you will spend and making sure that a BI solution, if it's Sisense or anybody else, is the right one for you. And if this is articulated, you will get support, you will get visibility, and resources in order to make sure the evaluation goes forward. So in terms of that worth the change, consider the amount of time you're going to be spending to do the evaluation. Is it you? Is it everybody else? How much time will it take to evaluate, implement, roll out, and maintain? So once you kind of have that information, you want to see what the external benefits will be. So I wanted to share some examples of what customers have shared with me in terms of benefits. So if it's a financial group, maybe they want to have profit and loss transparency. So I spoke with one organization that has a huge cost savings initiative in order to lower costs across the enterprise, but they don't really know where their costs are in different products and different groups. It's all stored in the ERP, and they don't really have that transparency on a day-to-day basis, and so they need to know that. If then you have that available, is that going to be a savings of $10,000, $100,000, or $1 million? That then gets visibility with all the competing projects that are out there. Reduced inventory if you're supply chain or working with manufacturing, for example. Reduced inventory can really help increase profitability. You can reduce, it can also make you have a competitive advantage that you can get products out to your clients in a much faster rollout or delivery schedule. Is a common benefit that people want to see. Increase customer satisfaction. So if you're in the software business and you want to see how much your product is being used, if you want to see the top 10 requests from your tier 1 clients, for example, these are things that BI can deliver in terms of internal cost savings, but also growth opportunities. Because I've seen in my career that a lot of times directors and executives can bring cost savings, but the real things that get funded are the things that allow the company to grow and add revenue. So if you can do both, it's a much higher chance that this will get visibility and driving forward, because you're not just bringing cost savings, but also revenue growth. External benchmarking is another example in terms of seeing how well you're doing versus other industries or internal groups, so you can see if you need to improve or not, as well as increase over sales performance. So here at Sisense, we use Sisense in order to see how well we're doing, track metrics, key KPIs, all the way from the CEO down to the account executive, so we can see what's going on, so we're all held accountable to our own activities in a data-driven organization. So the next step is, of course, navigating your requirements for delivering database transformations to the company. I think we're all here and understand that companies have to evolve and transform. And we all have competing ideas how that will work and how that should be done. If you're buying just one single license for yourself, then you can make that decision what it looks like. But if you're looking at a solution like Sisense or something that's more enterprise ready or for small businesses where you're having multiple users interact with the data, you're going to need to bring other people into this buying team. So there are always multiple stakeholders, and failure to involve someone in this can almost always kill your initiative. I typically see that when IT is not involved, because IT can control the data, and they're the people who can give access to databases or data sources that you might have, and if they aren't consulted or brought in, they can typically say that this is not going to happen. Alternatively, IT can also say, we don't want to be involved, and we want you to have a cloud premise, and you just do everything yourself. So these are really important considerations to understand. So when you're looking at what these requirements would look like, here are some of the things that companies have told us that they want to look at. So cloud versus on-premise. Cloud BI is a very big topic, of course. There's still a lot of companies that need it on-prem. I would say majority are still saying that data is too sensitive, that they need to have it available within their own premise. So that's fine. You have different options there. Are you looking for a full stack BI solution, or are you looking just for data visualization? There are two different tools that provide different solutions, and maybe you just need data visualization, don't need the back-end database that some full stack solutions offer. Are you working with multiple data sources, or do you have a data warehouse already? These are some of the things that you can talk about with your internal team and bring them on board to get their support to see how it will impact their lives and make it easier. In the OEM space, if you're reselling a BI solution or integrating within your project, embedding is really important. Data security, row-level access is really important, and you want to be able to segment that with having strong user authentication. That's a really important part, or if you want to have mobile support for sales teams in the field. And lastly, do you want to rely on external consultants or internal expertise? A lot of times people feel like they don't have the knowledge and they want to work with consultants to help them, or they want to have this knowledge in-house. These are all really important considerations in order to understand what kind of solution that you need to be looking at. Once you do that, then it's now time to evaluate BI software. So sometimes I have companies who I speak with who have done all that legwork and then have selected us because we are a great fit for everything they want. And many times they're somewhere in between. They're still figuring things out, they're doing their research, and they're looking to find out what would be the right fit and what are things that they need to understand. And we're very happy to kind of act as an external advisor to help them figure out how do we get to the evaluation stage. Once you're there, we certainly want to make sure you do your internal research. Look at analyst reports. A lot of companies typically look at G2 Crowd or Gartner, for example, to help them navigate this immense field of BI providers. I really sympathize with companies trying to figure out which one is the right one, unless you really know the space very well. Typically, there's referrals that are asked for that can help navigate a little bit of the space. Then we have an internal discovery call, so that would be with the initial maybe companies that you're looking at. This can range in different formats. We've had an initial call with somebody who's been on a task force just to learn more about the company and see if there's a good fit. Then that can typically go into a group discussion. So if you have a large buying committee who has a stake in the decisions, then you can have a presentation to that entire group to see who's the right fit and to make sure that key requirements have been addressed in order to move forward into a technical evaluation. So I would, this can take many different forms. It can be just an initial technical deep dive with a sales engineer to address specific requirements that you have. You can also work on your own data. It really depends on your organization and how you want to formulate that technical evaluation. Key to this, before you're going into a real deep dive of the selected POC, is that you need to narrow down the funnel. When I hear clients who are going to be doing a proof of concept, or what we call here at Sisense a test drive, on 5 or 7 different companies, it's just too much work. It won't happen. Realistically, I think you can evaluate 2, 3 companies in order to see if there's a good fit. And hopefully by the time you're there, you really understand the similarities and differences of these tools, and you just really need to understand the implementation and rollout. So BI success is really driven by how successful the people who consume the information have it and can access it in part of their business making or data-driven business decisions. So if they're getting everything in 1 click, or do they have to do 3 clicks, is it fast, or is it interactive? These are things you want to be testing out in that POC. And then, of course, there is always the final presentation on that selection that you've made to an executive group, anybody who's funding the project, any kind of executive stakeholders. And at that point, you should be able to make a decision on the tool that you want to roll out and deploy. I will just kind of end with this, is that you really need to set timelines on how long this should take. After you've done that initial framework of understanding the business impact, getting the different stakeholders, seeing the value that this will drive, people like to wander around aimlessly sometimes for a period of time, but all hikers need goals like reaching a mountain peak or seeing famous landmarks. And so you really need to set those timelines on how long these all should take, because people need to be guided. The different stakeholders need to see what is happening, when deployment will happen, when budget will be necessary. And if I hear people are saying, yeah, we're thinking about doing this next year or 8 months from now, there's so many new things that can happen, so many changes that can influence your process, that I really kind of encourage you to say, we want to get this done by a certain time. We have these different steps. We've allocated time and resources to make it done. Those are companies that get this, they implement BI. And once you are able to do that, that's because you know that the business drive is necessary, or the business need is necessary in order to make it happen. And with that, then I will hand it over to my friend Martin.
Okay, well, thank you, Adam. I'll just make sure I'm showing you the right thing. There we go. Right, hopefully everybody can see that. Firstly, let me thank Sisense for inviting me today. You can see on this slide a lemon and a peach. You definitely want a peach. You do not want a lemon. Selecting lemons is a very common activity in the IT industry. A lemon, the term lemon came from a paper written in the 1970s by a character called George Akerlof. It's called The Market for Lemons, and how people very often buy things that turn out to be not entirely useful for them. So the lemon is what the peach is what you want, but selecting peaches is actually a little bit more difficult than you might imagine. And if you want to see examples of people who've selected lemons, then you only need to go on the internet and do a little bit of searching, because a lot of the litigations between suppliers and companies who are buying software are on there. I'm not going to mention names, I'm too polite for that, but they're very easy to find. Now, why do you want a BI platform? Well, in actual fact, there's only one reason you want a BI platform. It's to make better decisions. There is no other reason. So if you are in the process of looking at selecting a BI platform, or more generally a business analytics platform, then you really need to understand who is going to benefit in terms of being able to make better decisions. Is it people on the front line, on the the call center, say? Is it managers? It's probably all of these people. And you need to have some idea of how that's going to happen, because in reality, decisions are the place that you start in all of this. You don't start with the technology. You start with who is making decisions and how those decisions can be improved. Now, BI provides input to tactical decisions in the main. When you produce graphs and charts and dashboards and so on, then those are typically used for tactical decisions by managers, typically, change the distribution of salespeople or whatever the outcome of the analysis is. If you embed BI into everyday applications, then you can provide input to transactional applications and decide what kind of thing you want to offer a particular customer, or how to treat a particular supplier and so on. But the business analytics space is moving very, very quickly. And what you really, really need to make sure of, and I've got more data on this later, but what you really need to make sure of is that you choose a platform that is as open as possible, because an open platform will allow you to integrate with your everyday applications, maybe machine learning, maybe some prescriptive analytics, various other kinds of analytics. Business intelligence is not an island. So when you select a platform, make sure that you pick a platform that can connect to many other kinds of analysis and to other kinds of applications. In terms of who needs to use a BI platform, well, when I speak to people, and I typically speak to about 3 organizations a month, it's usually maybe 2 people that I speak to from the organization, and they tend to represent one end of the organization or the other. And I've always found that difficult, because business intelligence needs to address everything from developers through to the consumers of dashboards. And in the middle there are data scientists and business analysts who need to do their thing, and authors of dashboards and so on. They all need to be involved in this. Of course, not everybody is going to do it, but representatives from each of those particular functions. The danger that if you don't do this, the danger is that you end up with islands of information. So one guy's using Excel, another guy's using product A, another guy's using product B, and trying to get the information to flow between all those things can be very difficult. So you really need to make sure that you are addressing the needs of everybody who might touch the particular BI platform that you are wanting to choose. And at this point, I should say that very often when I speak to organizations, it's management who are desperate to get away from the IT function. And because they're desperate to get away from the IT function, they overlook the fact that actually to do some more sophisticated things maybe, you will need to involve developers. It cannot all be just front-end playing around with dashboards and charts. The whole thing needs to integrate into your organization as a whole. So it does need some technical representation in terms of selecting a product. Now, here's how to choose a lemon. And just hope your daughter doesn't marry someone like that. But the first thing is a poor understanding of requirements. And Adam has talked about that, and I'm not going to go over it. You need to understand why you need to do this thing. Following a political agenda, in my experience, 80% of the people I speak to, there's already some agenda in place. You know, if your CEO plays golf with the sales director or something of XYZ business intelligence company, then it's probably a done deal, and there's probably not much you can do about it. But following a political agenda is a route to problems. In my earlier incarnations, I used to be a troubleshooter for database problems, and very often I'd get called in when it was all too late, you know, when a batch run that should complete in 24 hours was complete in maybe 3 or 4 hours, was completing in 30 hours. And there's absolutely nothing that could be done about it. And problems like that are serious. And those problems come about through two things in the main: political bias and following the herd, which is the next thing. And very often when I speak to people, their shortlist just contains all the favorites. You know, they might have a list of 6 products, and 4 of them are just totally inadequate, just totally not the products they should be looking at. And they've put them there because they're prominent names that they've come across in the marketplace. You really need to trial a product because and trial it seriously, because without that you will never know what it can do and what it can't do. And you need to get people involved from the organization who have some particularly difficult requirements to see if the product you're looking at can meet those requirements. Poor extensibility, I'll be talking about this later as well. Because BI is moving so quickly, you just do not know what your organization is going to want in a year or two's time, and how you're going to meet that. So you need a BI platform that can interface easily with Java, say, or Python, or R, or use a different JavaScript graphics library. All of these things. Do not buy a closed environment, because you will be trashing it in 3 years' time and buying another product, inevitably. A poor understanding of architecture. Well, architecture is largely the determiner of performance and scalability. You really need to understand how, as your use of a platform increases, how it will scale and how it will perform. And many organizations don't do that, and they end up with it taking 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, to produce a report, and users become disinclined to use it, obviously, because it's taking too long. And do not be overly impressed by superficial features. So that's the selection thing in an outline. I've got more detail in a moment. But then you have what's called moral hazard. After the supplier has got your money and your commitment, how is that supplier going to treat you? Now, you can get some input to that from the various crowd sites, because people will talk about that kind of thing. But clearly you need to make sure that your supplier invests heavily in the product, that the product's moving along at a fairly good rate, because the whole market is moving along at a fairly good rate, and that support is good, because sometimes support is not good, and it can be the end of your project. So how to select a peach? Well, it's just the opposite of what I've said, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but please include all affected parties in the process. If you don't do that, then somebody will become disgruntled somewhere along the line, and it will become difficult to make the whole thing work. Significant proof of concept, look at supplier history, check forums and so on, insist on open and extensible architecture, do not follow the crowd, and try to eliminate political bias. If you can do all those things, then you stand a much, much better chance of actually coming out with the product that is right for you in your organization. Now, this slide is a result of talking to 43 organizations over the past 18 months. And it's sorted by the after bars. What it is a record of what people were most interested in when I first spoke to them, and then what they considered to be the most important features after I'd spoken to them. So you can see, starting at the top, scalability. Before, getting off 2/3 of people thought scalability was important. Afterwards, everybody thought it was important. Easy integration, again, most people thought that was important, integrating with various applications and maybe other kinds of analytics. Fast development, everybody wants fast development, and that didn't change. The reason they want fast development is because if you're an OEM, you just want to reduce the cost of production. And if you are a business user, then clearly you just want results as quickly as you can get them. Everybody wants pretty graphics. The big discrepancy here was in extensibility. Most people had not considered extensibility, and it's a very, very important thing. Extensibility ensures that you do not end up in a blind alley with nowhere to go. Most people want self-service functionality. Cost was an important issue. Data management. These are generic terms, but yes, the ability to connect to as many data sources as possible and to be able to maybe produce bespoke connections to difficult data sources and so on. Easy admin, and then we come to advanced analytics. Again, many people view BI as an island all on its own. They hadn't really considered that they might want to have some clustering, or they might want to have some predictive capability embedded into their dashboards and all these kinds of things. So that became much more important to many people. And then we go back down to paginated reporting, which is still surprisingly popular. Half the people out there still want to be able to produce paginated reports with logos on them and page numbers and all that kind of thing. And then finally, everybody I spoke to was initially interested in the cloud. After talking about it, then about 1/3 of them were interested in the cloud. Because you talk about issues like the latency in uploading data and the security issues around it, and they become a little bit more disinclined to go that way. So I'm not going to go through all of this because it would just take too long, but these are the most important issues as far as I'm concerned. As far as your supplier is concerned, you have to do a meaningful trial. And you have to see a history of investment in the product, because some products, they don't move along all that quickly. If you want an example of that, look at IBM Cognos. For a long time, that product didn't go anywhere particularly. IBM's doing a little bit more with it now. But you need to look at how quickly the product is moving along, because the whole analytics scene is moving along very quickly. Then functionality, well, you need extensibility, which I've mentioned, support for advanced analytics, natural language generation. Now, this is where AI starts to come into the picture, because natural language generation, and I'm thinking particularly of a product called Narrative Science, which I believe Sisense can use, uses AI to essentially generate a dialogue from your data. So instead of, on your mobile device, trying to look at some horrible squeezed up charts, you can get a little dialogue that says, oh, last week's sales were up 10% on the same period last quarter or whatever. Products XYZ did particularly well. Products ABC did not so well, and so on. So the AI knows what to look for from the nature of the data, and it's worth investigating, because this is one of the first encroachments, if you like, of AI into the BI arena. Integration with other delivery mechanisms, and I'm thinking about speech particularly, and other ways of getting data out into the world, and the Internet of Things is becoming fairly important there too. On the architecture, then, we need scalability. I mean, that's really the key thing in architecture. And as far as performance is concerned, then you really need to make sure that performance does not degrade worse than linearly. because if it does, then you've got problems. If it degrades linearly, then you should be able to add more resources to meet the linear increase in the number of people using the system. If you have worse than linear degradation in performance, then you've got a problem on your hands. And then data architecture, well, the most important thing there, because everybody's providing connectors for all the popular data sources, but the important thing is that you have an API for bespoke connections so that you can go to some difficult data sources, because most large organizations have them, and in fact, most organizations anyway have them. So in terms of futures, it's very simple, really. Business intelligence is becoming effectively the front end for a whole lot of other analytics. Business intelligence is not a world unto itself. It is the presentation interface, if you like, for other forms of analytics, as well as the things that we traditionally associate with business intelligence, like charts and dashboards. So machine learning, the inclusion of predictive models into business intelligence, prescriptive analytics. I'm not going to go into that because I haven't got time, but at the end of the day, prescriptive analytics will tell you how something should be done rather than what is going to happen. And the mixing of prescriptive analytics with predictive analytics provides some very powerful solutions, which again can be incorporated into business intelligence. And finally, artificial intelligence itself will be more and more embedded into business intelligence platforms, because the task of analyzing large numbers of data sources and looking for meaningful insights is endless. And without artificial intelligence assistance, eventually it will become impossible. And in some respects, it already is impossible for some organizations. So AI help is definitely what we need. So thank you for your attention, and at this point I'll hand back to Sophia.
Perfect. Thank you, Martin. Okay, so this brings us to the Q&A portion of our webinar. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box on the right-hand side. And we did have a few questions that came in. The first question is, what crowd sites are good?
Okay, I can take a stab at that. So there are a lot of crowd review sites on the internet, and we actually have a blog post. I think it lists 20 of them that you can research. Some of the things that come off at the top of my head are G2 Crowd, which is the predominant review site, I think, for BI solutions in this kind of customers forum. IT Central Station is pretty good. Trust Radius and Gartner Peer Insight come to mind. There's also a lot more on there as well, and I think ones that don't come to mind are also on that blog post that I mentioned.
Perfect. Another question, according to you, what are the criteria to evaluate a meaningful POC?
Want to start, Martin, and I'll go after you? Or
Yeah, okay. Well, a meaningful POC has to address some of the real needs in your business. It's sort of as simple as that, but as difficult as that, because various people in your organization, as I mentioned, will have different needs, and you need to make sure that you cover those needs and do things that are representative of real needs. Yeah, I know examples of organizations that have walked away from a BI platform after selection because they realize it just can't do some simple trivial thing, that's really important to them, but it just cannot do it. So look at all the unusual things that you might want to do. All the ordinary things it's going to do anyway, but just look at the unusual things that your organization might want and focus on those.
Yeah, and I would agree with Martin fully. In my own experience with POCs, we look really to make sure we're hitting the requirements of different stakeholders so that everybody feels confident with the solution from the IT perspective, business user, executive stakeholder, and then really producing something that will provide immediate ROI at the beginning. So we don't want to do something that's simple or that you're currently doing very easily, but that we can, when you show the POC completion to different people, I say, wow, I didn't know that, or look how easy this is or how this justifies the business case that you did, that usually makes for a great POC.
Perfect. Another question that came in, is it possible to estimate reliable return on investment for business analytics projects?
Oh, well, let me jump in on this one.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. The answer to that is it's very difficult. Now, let me give you a little bit of background to that. You know, if you are implementing a system which you know, costs X amount of money, and you know that by implementing this system that 20 people are going to be able to do 50 people's work, then the benefits from that are very easily calculated. It's savings of 30 people. And you know, we're used to that kind of environment in IT. We've used IT mainly as a means of realizing efficiencies. But when it comes to business intelligence, it's a lot more difficult. And what I would suggest is that what you need to do, although whether your organization would accept it or not, I don't know, but you need to do something like an expected return, because an expected return would allow you to essentially look at all the scenarios that you might deliver. So right from we spend all this money on this BI platform and actually we don't get any benefits from it, right through to we spent all this money on this BI platform and wow, it's transformed our business. So you have all those possibilities from one end to the other end, and you then put some probabilities on those and you calculate an expected return. And then once you've got that, then you can calculate some variance as well. You know, what are the boundaries for what might happen. Now, a lot of organizations won't do that. I know organizations who do, and they're typically in risk industries anyway. So things like maybe financial services or petrochemicals. Yeah, I know one very large petrochemical company that uses nothing other than expected return. So you need to do that. Otherwise, you're back to, well, you know, how is this going to benefit us before you know how it's going to benefit you, because that's the nature of business intelligence to some extent. You can have a rough feel for what's going to happen, but in detail, in truth, you really don't know what's going to happen because you don't know what you're going to find and how useful it's going to be for the particular people in your business. So I would recommend expected return, and if you're interested in that, just do a search on the internet because you'll find more about it.
Right. And I would just chime in with that. It is easier, I found, for clients to look at ROI from internal cost savings. So if you're looking how much time it takes to produce reports or any kind of insights, you can look at the time across different people who are doing that, and you can get a rough estimation of how much time that would save. That's an easier exercise, but then calculating the intangible benefits, like things that Martin just mentioned, in terms of what greater speed to insights or more accurate data or self-service analytics, what will that do to the organization? How will that transform the organization? That's where you need to kind of break it down, as you mentioned, and that will then help drive the ROI and expected ROI, how long it will take to achieve.
Thank you. One other question that came in, considering BI tools available with the scalability and extensibility, is BW or DW still required for enterprises today?
Well, it depends, of course. It depends on how much data you've got, how much investment you've got in your existing data warehouse, because you're probably not going to throw it away. But the truth is that for many people's needs, the answer is no. You will not need a data warehouse, because what is happening is, as you know, data warehouses are, you know, schema on storage. You have to determine exactly how your data is going to be structured before you throw the data into the data warehouse. What we are moving towards, some products more than others, is schema on read. So basically, your software effectively formats the data in the way you want it on the fly, so you don't have to deliver some predefined schema. But it depends on your data volumes, really, because, you know, the latter, the schema on read, will not address probably hundreds of gigabytes, but, you know, 1, 2, maybe 4 or 5 gigabytes, maybe it will. So it depends on data volumes and the complexity of what you're trying to do.
Perfect. Well, I don't think we have any more questions. On behalf of everyone here at Sisense, I would like to say a big thank you to Adam and Martin. And thank you for joining us, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webcast.